Hello, welcome to Legal View with Michael Ayala. Thank you so much for joining me. Today I'm joined by Larry Johnson. He actually lives out in Texas. So we're going to be talking about the Carmelo Anthony trial. He lives about 30 minutes from Frisco, Texas, where the incident took place and where the trial is taking place in Collin County. Just wanted to check in with him about some of the reverberations in the community. He has four children, and basically all of them involved in both the football and track community out there. So you can give us some insight into all that as well. Larry Johnson, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I want to take you back to when this incident first happened. Give me a sense of how it reverberated in your community. What were the reactions in your community? Again, about 30 minutes away from Frisco, Texas.
Yeah, initially I would say shock amongst the high schoolers, and at the time even middle school was getting wind of what was going on. So that was probably the general sentiment, shock.
Now, a lot of people are complaining that it was the defense who injected race into this trial. Was that something that started to bubble up right away out there?
Yeah. Unfortunately, it does, and it did. And I would say even today it's still a I don't know. I don't know if it's out in front or it simmers behind, but it seems like you've got to pick a side, and it's a racial divide. It has nothing to do with the truth, which is really odd, especially when you're trying to navigate those kind of conversations with, not only my kids. We have one girl and then three boys, but then also their peer groups, and the majority of them are white. So it's very, very interesting sitting there. And they do feel comfortable talking to me, and just listening to them. I do more listening than I do kind of preaching to them. Maybe that's why they like talking to me. But yeah, it seemed like you had to pick a side right away. And the side was based on race.
Interesting. All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the trial itself. First and foremost, I want to get a sense from you about this whole thing regarding the tent culture. Number one, the idea that one of the coaches who testified for the state talked about it's just not done. You don't go to other teams' tents and hang out. But also, on the defense's case, one of the coaches said the culture is different in track than it is in football, that it's much more open because of some of the downtime during track. Number one, is that the case? And number two, is there a difference between football and track?
Well, the easy answer is your second question. Is there a difference between football and track? I mean, absolutely. You can't just walk into, your opponent's locker room in football, especially 6A football, in Texas, or football in general in Texas. It's not going to happen. And really anywhere, it's just not going to happen, right? So that's an easy one. Tent culture on the other hand, look, these meets are long. You typically want just your team under your tent. And then also you want to manage, a lot of people have their personal bags and phones, wallets, right, while they go compete. You can't carry those things on you. And there's not many coaches. There's a lot more kids participating or competing than there are coaches. So they're clearly undermanned, if you would. So the general sentiment is you kind of stay, in your own area. But when there's bad weather, well, actually, people are probably leaving the tent and they're going behind the stadium, because these are very large, at least the ones that I've been associated with here in Texas. So we'll just go underneath. I mean, there are times if lightning strikes, maybe we're even getting in the car, or the folks have to get back on the bus. Right. For the most part, you kind of stay under the stadium. Now, I say all that to say that's the general rule, but is it ironclad? No, I mean, one of the appeals behind track is it's incredibly social. You got fit guys and fit, young ladies, and, these people are some of them are dating, some of them just friends. But there's truly a social aspect of it beyond the competition, or, aside from the competition. Most of that stuff is done outside of the tent. You don't want to let the coaches, see that going on. But it's there's a lot of that happening too. So,
All right. So let me take you to the trial. Love to get your thoughts on what happened here, the incident itself. Carmelo Anthony now on trial for the murder of Austin Metcalf. Metcalf, went up to him, actually him and his brother, apparently, according to some of the testimony, went up to him, wanted him to leave the tent. He told him he wasn't going to leave. He got belligerent. What are your thoughts on the trial?
Look, I think it's sad, man. I mean, a kid's life was lost. And as a parent, I couldn't imagine, the anguish associated with that. I know initially when this incident went down, which had to be sometime in 2025. I don't know if you would know exactly when. Okay. The rumors were swirling. And I don't want to say, I don't want to put any of that, share any of that with you because I don't know. But it sounded like there was, these two did know each other and there was an altercation prior to that track meet. How far back, I don't know, but that's what reached my kids.
What's interesting is one of the young ladies who testified, one of the teenagers who was there, she was from a different high school. She told the court that initially when she talked to police, she had told them that there was an incident between the two of them that she knew of, and that might have been the cause for this. Now, she since has said that was not true. So the rumors that she had heard were not true. So she didn't testify to it at trial. She did say, I did tell them that there was a connection. She didn't say what that connection was or what kind of confrontation it was. But so maybe that's where that rumor came from. Maybe at some point after that, she started saying, hey, those two guys knew each other from X, Y, and Z, and that sort of grew. But I guess it turns out that that's not the case because neither side has talked about them knowing each other.
Will we actually get to the truth, right? With this sort of undertow of picking a side based on race, I think it sort of muddies the pursuit of justice. And look, I'm not saying that his actions were justified. I just wonder if he can get a fair trial in light of everything that seems to be mounting, just the situation that he's in. That's all.
So race is obviously sort of boiled to the surface. Again, a lot of comments in my Instagram, et cetera, Facebook, folks talking about, well, they should never put race into it. And I've been responding to that, Larry, by saying it has to be considered when you're a defense attorney, you need to put all the information out there. And there's a chance that Metcalf responded to Anthony because of his race, the way he did. Would he have responded to a white kid as aggressively? Would he have responded to a white kid at all? Would Anthony have responded to a black kid asking him to leave the same way he responded to a white kid? It informs, to me, how people respond to situations. And it's something that you're not just throwing out there willy-nilly as a defense attorney. You're throwing it out there because it's a very real circumstance of these young people's lives. And I think that is what got people a little worried about there being an all-white jury. Not that white people can't be objective, but they can't relate to the types of things that we're talking about here in terms of all the things that may have affected Anthony and Metcalf in the way they responded to the situation.
Yeah, look, I'm sure in the public domain, there was an incident up in Allen, which is not too far from Frisco. And Allen is known for, their football team. I think they have like over maybe 7,200 kids in their high school. So as a matter of fact, Texas has been trying to push for a 7A status that would get those size schools to compete against, other schools that size. Typically, like a Plano East, not Duncanville, but Frisco, those schools are more like maybe 3,500, maybe 2,700. But my point is that at Allen, the starting quarterback just so happened to be black. It's predominantly, well, not predominantly white, but majority. And man, they went ahead and spray painted the N-word on their garage door at the house, at their home. Such that they ended up transferring, hit the, Dallas Morning News, and, we got a lot of local coverage over here, and why? I mean, we're talking football, and, where does race come up? And sometimes it blindsides, these young people, because they think they're going out here and just kind of competing, right? It's everyday life. Let's go play, and supposedly the best person gets to play, but man, it's, just race is just interwoven into the fabric of the U.S. in
Yeah.
such a way that we don't even realize it.
And what's important to say about that is, even though it happened to the one kid, it really happens to every black person in the community, right? Because that is such a sort of, you know, just a visceral experience for everyone in the community. And if you have a few of those, it sort of gets into you. And again, that's my point. It will affect the way you respond to whatever in the community. It just does. And that's kind of where I kind of stand on it, which is why, as a defense attorney, I feel like you got to bring it up because it absolutely is. It's a reality.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate reality, and believe me, I'm always hesitant to, I don't go around looking to play the race card first,
Of
right?
course.
But look, Allen, going back to the Allen example, I think they, a couple of years ago, they built like an $8 million football stadium. Maybe it was more than that. Maybe it was 12 million. And when that kid left, I mean, there was a sizable drop off in the next quarterback up, which gave them a losing season. And a
Right.
lot of those boosters were not happy. But the parents were also not satisfied with the response from the school district in terms of the
Mhm.
support and holding these people accountable. Why? I don't know. But, it does. Yes, it happened to one family, but it reverberates and many are affected. I mean, the whole city was. So it's unfortunate. And I think we're kind of seeing the same thing here. Um,
Yeah.
you hope that justice will prevail and it shouldn't be tainted by things that don't necessarily, that aren't factual, that aren't true, that don't, um, uh, I don't know. It just shouldn't weigh on uh, the scales of justice. That's
Yeah.
maybe that's sort of a utopian way of thinking. It's probably naive, but I think that's the way it's set up, right? I mean, what do you
Yeah.
think?
No, that's the hope. That's the hope for the system in general. That it's set up so that both sides have an opportunity to figure out who's going to be on the jury. I think one of the issues here was, yes, they did remove the last three black potential jurors, but there's just not a whole lot of black people in Collin County. It's only 12% black,
Uh,
49% white. It's like 20 some odd percent Chinese or Asian, and then you got 12% Hispanic. And so you know, this is just the way it worked out. This is the community. You have a right to be judged by your peers in your community, and that's what's happening here. And the best we can do, Larry, is hope for justice.
well, Mike, I would say, look, if if you want to be judged by your peers, there should be diversity, right? Uh, and yeah, I understand, the process of selecting, but if you had 600 called for this process, for this selection
They did,
process,
yeah,
and
600.
why they're intentional about striking, it just makes you wonder why, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I pray for
Well, I will
both.
say this, Larry. The reason given, and when you try to strike jurors, you can't do it because of race. So you have to give some legitimate reason. So the court asked them, what was their reason? They were educators, and they were educators within the school system that this was involved in. So that, as far as the court was concerned, was a legitimate enough reason
And
for
with the
them
reason,
not to be on the jury.
what's the reason? Because I see that as insight. Like that would be very helpful to get insight on sort of the culture and the lay of the land inside that educational system, right? But so would they think that would be sort of a conflict of interest?
I think they felt like, and it's twofold. The illegal reason that they're giving the court is that there might be some bias that would creep in. That insider knowledge is actually not what you want. You want someone objective, somebody outside of all that, so they can look at this objectively. Okay. But the argument you make is has been used in many trials. They want the educator in there who can provide that perspective. But as far as the law is concerned, it was a legitimate reason, and I certainly understand that because that is could be a legitimate reason because there's a question of objectivity. But I also want to say this: there were a number of other black jurors or potential jurors who said, not all of them clearly, but who said they didn't feel that they could put this young man behind bars. And so they were immediately stricken from the jury. So that weeded out a number as well. So, yes, your point is well taken. 600, you would think they would be able to find one. But again, I wasn't there for it, so I don't know how it all went down, but what the numbers were. Statistics seem to have played out a little weirdly, but here we are.
I just think anytime there is sort of public decisions made without the process playing through, we're in a bad place. I
Without
think we're in a
shining a
bad
light
place
on,
as
I
a
agree
society.
100%.
And that's kind of what I feel from the outside looking in. Again, it's an incredibly unfortunate incident. Even if the kids, I mean, me and the boys had had this conversation like, what would you do in that scenario? And just kind of talking through that stuff. And there's no need to stab the person. But I don't know. What
Yeah.
you also don't need to go up and climb over stadium stairs to get to those
And
to
put your
get.
hands on the kid,
I mean, you could
right?
just walk off too, right? You don't have to
Yeah,
go.
absolutely. And it's
I
just
don't.
funny how they branded Carmelo Anthony as the sole aggressor. But aggressive actions were taken on both sides. And again, like you said, I'm not saying Anthony was justified at all with what he was doing. But again, let's characterize this properly. Let's look at the evidence properly, and try to get to a just result. Anyway, I got to run.
Yep.
Larry Johnson, thank you
Yeah.
so much
Thanks
for
for having me,
joining
man.
me and sharing your insights. Truly appreciate it. And we'll see you real soon. Folks, we'll
You
see
got
you
it.
soon as well. Continue to come back to my Substack at Mike Ayala 2. Continue to provide you as much interesting content as I can. Have a great evening.